Fresh meat.
Writer, director, producer, editor, musician. Few filmmakers can boast a skill set nor breadth of genres than John Carpenter. In this latest installment, we take a look back at the legendary career of a man who revolutionized film music, created an entirely new horror genre, and influenced a whole generation of filmmakers in the process, as we induct another horror maestro into Arrow in the Head's Horror Hall of Fame. Born in Carthage, New York, and raised in the great state of Kentucky, Carpenter was the kind of natural-born filmmaker whose creative drive arrived at an early age. His first low-budget short was made before he was even a high school student. But film wasn't the only passion running through the young Carpenter's veins, with his love of music a byproduct of his father Howard being a music professor. Howard would eventually chair the music department at Kentucky University, where Carpenter became a student himself, before transferring to the University of Southern California's School of Cinematic Arts. A string of student films would follow, as Carpenter experimented with his style and honed his expanding skill set. It didn't take long for the hardworking and hungry film student to make an impression in Hollywood, with one of the short films on which he'd collaborated winning an Academy Award in 1970. Carpenter's ability to work across multiple departments would end up proving crucial in completing his first feature film, 1974's Dark Star. Made alongside co-writer Dan O'Bannon, who famously reused elements of the story in Alien, Dark Star cost a modest $60,000 and would see Carpenter take on the roles of composer, producer, and most importantly, director. While O'Bannon would garner the attention of George Lucas for his work on the film's special effects, Carpenter quickly earned kudos around Hollywood for what he was able to achieve given the somewhat limited resources at his disposal. He would follow Dark Star 2 years later with another low-budget entry, this time switching gears from science fiction comedy to gritty crime thriller with Assault on Precinct 13. He would again take on multiple roles on the film while adding editor to his list of talents. Assault on Precinct 13 was a notable step forward for a number of reasons, not least of which its synth soundtrack, which would become a career trademark, but also because it marked the first time he would collaborate with Deborah Hill, a vital member of his creative team, whom he would also share a romantic relationship. After a brief detour into the world of TV movies, where he would meet his future wife, Adrienne Barbeau, he would bag his first big studio film with Eyes of Laura Mars, albeit as writer and not director. It was a clear sign that Carpenter had officially graduated to the big time, an opportunity he would not soon throw away, as he set out to create the first teen slasher movie. Much has been written about the unparalleled success of Halloween, and its stunningly simple premise of a babysitter being stalked by a masked maniac. Whilst it's true the idea was first suggested by producer Owen Yablon, and Carpenter has often been accused of stealing the story outline from an unmade sequel to Bob Clark's Black Christmas, the truth of the matter is that the director freely admits to borrowing from a variety of sources, to ultimately come up with something that felt wholly original. From the JoBlo-esque imagery to the soundtrack being heavily influenced by Goblin's work on Dario Argento's Suspiria. And while one collaboration was further strengthened with co-writer Deborah Hill, another was just getting started, with Carpenter forming a bond with Scream Queen Jamie Lee Curtis that would become the stuff of legend. Although Rick Rosenthal would take up directing duties on the follow-up to Halloween, Curtis and Carpenter would soon re-team for The Fog, this time with the help of co-writer Walter Hill. Despite the fact Carpenter was displeased with his final film, even going as far as to shoot entirely new scenes after viewing a rough cut, it would still go on to make a substantial profit for the studio. Following The Fog, Carpenter would briefly leave the horror genre behind, instead heading for the post-apocalyptic wasteland of New York in 1997, for another perfect pairing of director and star. Snake Plissken was another worthy addition to Carpenter and Hill's collection of iconic characters, but the casting of Kurt Russell wasn't always a sure thing. The studio initially wanted the film to star an already established tough guy, with names like Chuck Norris, Tommy Lee Jones, and Charles Bronson being thrown around. But believing Russell's combination of looks and freshness were key to the part, and having already built a strong working relationship with the young actor several years earlier on an Elvis telemovie, Carpenter's mind was already made up. Escape from New York was another critical and commercial success, not to mention yet another new addition to an ever-growing list of memorable music themes. It was a trademark he would intentionally move away from on his next project, recruiting legendary composer Ennio Morricone to score the Arctic-set science fiction horror The Thing, a remake of the 1951 film, but sticking closer to the original novella upon which it was based. The Thing was a bleak prospect for audiences in the summer of 1982, who were falling head over heels for a sweet little fellow called E.T. Despite being considered a disappointment at the time, it has since been celebrated by audiences and filmmakers alike for its game-changing practical effects and a powerfully ambiguous ending that is still dissected to this day. Carpenter's career would change course in the wake of The Thing's underperformance, and although his next 2 projects would net more pleasing results, both Christine and Starman were scripts that fell on the director's lap. The same could be said for the script of Big Trouble in Little China, if it weren't for the fact the 1986 genre-blending comedy felt like a film only Carpenter and Kurt Russell could have made. Despite being later acknowledged as a cult classic, the experience of making the film with 20th Century Fox, along with yet another disappointing box office performance, all but convinced Carpenter to retreat to the relative safety of low-budget filmmaking once more. Back on multitasking duty, Carpenter would write, direct, and score another pair of cult classics, the first of which was a follow-up entry to his Apocalypse trilogy, which began with The Thing. Prince of Darkness saw Carpenter fuse his fascination with quantum physics with his love of the horror genre. He would repeat the same trick just a year later with the brutally brilliant They Live, which was memorable not only for its sharp social commentary, but also for its masterful 6-minute fight scene, which ranks as one of the best brawls ever committed to film. The 90s would sadly mark a steady decline in the director's work, with Memoirs of an Invisible Man, Village of the Damned, and the ill-conceived Escape from LA failing to ignite the interest of critics or audiences. There were still fleeting glimpses of classic Carpenter in the likes of Tobe Hooper's anthology film Body Bags, and in the final chapter in his Apocalypse trilogy, In the Mouth of Madness. One false start on Halloween H2O, and another box office bomb later, Carpenter seemed somewhat content to sit back during the early 2000s and collect residuals for a new wave of remakes that included The Fog, Assault on Precinct 13, The Thing, and 2 fresh takes on Halloween from Rob Zombie. Carpenter's last feature as director would be the forgettable The Ward in 2010, but his musical output showed no sign of slowing. Throughout the following decade, he would continue to reach fans both old and new, as he released albums and travelled the world performing with his band. It wasn't until David Gordon Green and Danny McBride pitched their idea for a new Halloween project that Carpenter would be pulled back into the series that made his name for the first time since Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. The 2018 remake would earn praise for its realistic depiction of a PTSD-riddled Laurie Strode, and the film would go on to become the highest-grossing film in the franchise's 40-year history. Now, with more new music and Halloween films on the way, and with Carpenter collaborating with his son Cody on new music, the career of this horror maestro feels as though it's finally come full circle. But although so many young musicians and filmmakers continue to pay homage to the work of this titan of genre filmmaking, there will only ever be one John Carpenter.
Sometimes I will come across it on television, one of them, and I'll say, what was I thinking in that scene? Why did I do that? That's stupid. Why did I put the camera there? So I will go through a blistering critique of my own directing.
Hey, thanks for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our JoBlo Horror Videos channel. Tell your friends you like this sort of content. And turn on the bell, you know the one, to receive notifications for all of our latest videos. You know, we're an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.